करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। गुकारस्त्वन्धकारो वै ऋकारस्त्वनिवर्तकः अन्धकारनिरोधित्वात् गुरुरित्यभिधीयते। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः वशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Let's chant verses 19, 20 and 21. Number 19. मय्येव सकलं जातं मयि सर्वं प्रतिष्ठितं मय्येव सकलं जातं मयि सर्वं प्रतिष्ठितं मयि सर्वं लयं याति तद्ब्रह्माद्वयम् अस्मि अहं मयि सर्वं लयं याति तद्ब्रह्माद्वयम् अस्मि अद्वयम् अहम्। Number 20. अनोहनीयान् अहमेव तद्वत् महानहं विश्वम् अहं विचित्रम् अनोहनीयान् अहमेव तद्वत् महानहं विश्वमहं विचित्रम् पुरातनोऽहं पुरुषोऽहमीशो हिरण्मयोऽहं शिवरूपमस्मि पुरातनोऽहं पुरुषोऽहमीशो हिरण्मयोऽहं शिवरूपमस्मि। 21. अपाणिपादोऽहम् अचिन्त्यशक्तिः पश्यम्यचक्षुः सशृणोत्यकर्णः अपाणिपादोऽहमचिन्त्यशक्तिः पश्यामि चक्षुः सशृणोमि अकर्णः अहं विजानामि विविक्तरूपो न चास्ति वेत्ता मम चित्सदाहम् अहं विजानामि विविक्तरूपो न चास्ति वेत्ता मम चित्सदाहम्। So we were looking at, pardon me, we were looking at verse number 19 last time. Mayi eva sakalam jatam mayi sarvam pratishthitam mayi sarvam layam yati tad brahma advayam asmi aham. Right? So, So we saw the discussion about the immanence and the transcendence of the creation. And one thing that is to be kept in mind as we understand the whole creation, what is called samashti, the cosmic world, and my individual life. So there is a cosmic life, and there's a lot that's going on that I don't know about, I'm not concerned about, but it's there. You know, the galaxies, the various nakshatras, the various historical things, people, all kinds of things. And then we have our own life. Born at a particular time, having parentage, then limited by my knowledge, my connections, and a particular time where I cannot go beyond that. So that's what's called vyashti. So there is vyashti, and then there is, which is called individual life, and then there is samashti, which is cosmic life. Okay, so we know that. So one thing we should really keep in mind as we progress towards an understanding is this. This is the point I wanted to make. Whatever is talked about from a cosmic standpoint, from the standpoint of Ishvara, God, essentially applies to us in our own life as well. Essentially. Non-essentially, there could be differences. Like, for instance, I am responsible for leading my life, and there are other people responsible for leading the government, the society, doctors, lawyers. That's a much larger template of governance and life. But then I have my own life, which is a little portion of it. So that's a non-essential nature. That would be considered secondary or minor. The essential part is the same between vyashti and samashti, between the individual life and the cosmic life. So Ishvara also can say, from me comes out everything. So that's exactly what the verse number 19 says. So here in page 186, Swami Viditatmananda also says that Ishvara is both immanent and transcend. Right? So he's talking about Ishvara. So if you look at the essence of the word, of the verse 19, Mai eva sakalam jatam. Mai sarvam pratishtitam, mai sarvam layam yati, tad brahma advayam asmiyaham. So now the question is, when you say aham, me, aham means me, I, who is it referring to? Is it referring to Ishvara? Because that's what the explanation here is. Ishvara is both immanent and transcend. Or is it referring to you and I individually? And the thing that we should strive to understand and get is that it applies to both of us. Doesn't matter. Whatever applies to Ishvara, essentially, we've already looked at the non-essential part of it. He's responsible for managing the whole show, and I am responsible for managing my own show. Those are non-essential. But essentially, Ishvara is the same as me. How? Because the entire expression, pardon me, the entire manifestation is similar, if not the same, between Ishvara and me. This is what one has to really keep in mind as we understand it. So it applies to me also. That really all of the manifestations that I am aware of. You see, that's the thing. I'm aware of my manifestations. There's a lot of stuff going on. And it just becomes very visible to me. All my experiences, good and bad. It's like a movie screen. I'm watching a show. Really, this is exactly what it is. It's not just make-believe or anything. So you can actually turn a film on and go to a movie screen to watch a movie, and then you are engulfed with it. Similarly, there is a movie going on in your life and you are watching it all the time. So you are aware of all these kinds of things. But all these kinds of things are really, if you analyze it, they are appearing in you. They are staying with you, and they are disappearing in you alone. And you are still there. Even the whole show disappears, but you're still there. Exactly what happens in deep sleep. And then there's all kinds of, we've gone through all this. I won't belabor that point. So the immanence and the transcendence applies to both Ishvara, or you can substitute, you can say, to you and I, to the Jiva. On page number 186, he can say, the Jiva is both immanent and transcend. It's interesting, this comment that Swamiji made on page 187. So let me spend a couple of minutes on that. Similarly, Brahman, he says in the last paragraph on page 187, similarly, Brahman, without undergoing any intrinsic change, simply appears as the universe. Therefore, the universe is an appearance rather than being a real, tangible creation. This view of the universe is also beginning to be recognized by modern science. This is the point I wanted to make. Science also sees matter as nothing but waves of energy, meaning there is no tangibility about matter, even though it looks very tangible. There is no solidity to the universe really, because what appears very solid consists of molecules, which themselves are nothing but atoms. Within atoms, there is so much space, there is no such thing as a tangible particle ultimately. Beautiful point, important point. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes on that. So this is a fact. They're not a make-believe. The fact of the matter is, what Swamiji is saying is so true, that the modern science is also understanding that there is something funny going on. What's funny going on is that really amazingly, an object like a table which looks so solid cannot penetrate. You cannot even, at least if you have a rubber, you can bend it. You can't even bend it. It just repels you. You put your hand in it and your hand gets repelled. This is how solid it is. But if you analyze the so-called solidity, you find it's a mirage. Why? Because it is really 99.999% space. This is a fact. You can, if you are an accomplished physicist, you will know this. You can duplicate it. It's all space. And your and my hand is also all space. So the two so-called objects that are solid come together. And what really prevents the hand from really going right through it, because one can say, if it is 99.999% space, then why can't it just go right through? Aha! This is the trick of the creation of Ishvara. What happens is that there are fields of magnetic and electromagnetic forces that repel each other. And so when you touch the table and try to really hit it, hopefully not penetrate it, then you will destroy your hand. What you will see is that the solidity consists of an orderly set of magnetic and electromagnetic forces that repel each other. It wouldn't allow you to go. It just pushes it back. That's what it is. It is in fact nothing but just space alone. So also another interesting thing to think about is, we have talked about this very often, that there is no difference between the space inside this wall and the space outside this wall. No space inside this room and no space outside this room. Let's say not wall, but a room consisting of walls. And what divides this inside versus outside are the walls. And it would appear that we understand the fact that the room space is a figment of my imagination. Because I am now seemingly enclosing the space in different enclosures. There is the media room, there is a living room, there is a kitchen room, and so on. So we are using a prefix of the word room. Room space, really that's what it is. It's a media space, kitchen space, living space. So the space is the same, but we are preceding it by using some kind of a structural definition called a room or the walls. So here's the point that I was making. I am trying to make. So please stay with me for a minute. This is what the implication of this scientific explanation of Swami Viditatmananda is. I'm just giving it a slightly different understanding, a different way of looking at the understanding, not a different understanding. So what I'm saying is that one can argue that the space being what it is, the walls are paramount in separating the various rooms. It's very solid. It's very solid. So yeah, you're right that it's a figment of our imagination, that this is a kind of an enclosed space. It's not an enclosed space, but even the figment of our imagination is dictated by the shape of the walls in the room. One can argue that. Here's the thing to ponder about. The walls, like the table that we discussed, is also space. Also space. So really speaking, whether or not there are walls or not, it is really nothing but space alone. And Vedanta says this very clearly when we may do the Panchakosha. Pancha Mahabhutas. When we say the five types of tangible things that we see. 2 are relatively intangible and 3 are very tangible. The 2 that are intangible are space and air, Vayu. Akasha and Vayu. So this is what is called Amurta, means non-tangible. The 3 others that are tangible, called Murta, are fire, water, and earth, solid material. Okay, so this is the basic structure of creation, and we touched on this. If you studied Tattva Bodha, you would see that this is presented there, and in the Taittiriya Upanishad also, it points out the same thing, that one is responsible for the other. From Akasha is born the Vayu, Vayor Agnihi, Agne Apaha, Adbhyav Prithavi, Prithivya Oshadhayaha, Oshadibhyo Annam, Annat Purusha. This is all given in the Taittiriya Upanishad. So there it says, believe it or not, the Vayu, which is the next manifestation, the Akasha is the most intangible, slightly less intangible and therefore more tangible is air. More tangible than that is the fire. And the air is born out of akasha, of space. So this is where I really, as a scientist and as an engineer, I could not accept this. How can air be born out of space? That doesn't seem believable to me. But the more I studied it, and there the theories of quantum mechanics, when I started to study this much later on, confirm the fact that in fact there is something going on and something funny going on in space. Now, I've talked about this with you guys many, many times before. That was a revelation to me. So that doubt as an engineer got removed. Now I'm with it completely. What it said was, what Einstein pointed out was, you know the thing about the curved space, magnetism, electromagnetic waves. Magnetic waves. You see the thing that I was telling you about, that you cannot penetrate the table because of the forces, magnetic forces and electromagnetic forces. And these are strong forces, weak forces. But no matter what the forces are, they're all contained in the space. So Einstein, when I understood the curved space, made it very clear that it is not just... So this is the... Einstein really made a major revision to the Newtonian laws. So Isaac Newton had said that the space is like a stage. There's nothing there. And all the things are happening on space. This is what we also think, that space is nothing. There's no such thing as a... There's a lot of spiritual people who feel that there are only four things, which is Vayu, Agni, Apa and Prithvi. But space is not a thing. It's not a separate thing. Newton also said the same thing, that really space is just an empty... It's like a stage where things are happening, but there is nothing happening in the stage itself. Einstein revised it. He says that's not true. Because Einstein argued that the space also has very subtle forces that in fact give rise to other things. So this is the final thing. I've spent maybe too much time on this, but what it says is that really speaking, there is no solidity to the world. It appears solid, but there is nothing. But even space also has some forces. But the Atma is nirguna. It gives rise to the forces, but by itself it doesn't have a force. Anyway, that's a separate thing that we will tackle someplace else. So that's the point that it is making. That really speaking, one should meditate on. All these are meditative verses now towards the end of the Kaivalya Upanishad. And then of course it is highly confirmed by our experience of the dream, where there is so much solid stuff, there's so much happening. Both, you cannot say that in the dream there is no solid stuff, it's all thoughts. Hey, try saying that to yourself when you are dreaming. You should have some kind of a way to wake you up in the middle of the dream. Even the last night, I had some very funny dreams, really, and I said, "What the heck? Where did that come from?" Not unpleasant, but just some very strange happenings. And I immediately got up and I said, "This is amazing. This is what the real life also seems to be real, but it isn't. It looks very solid. Even in the dream, there are solid objects, this, that, or the other. There is no solidity." And Swami Viditatmananda pointed out that even the science is beginning to understand that. But they are still clinging. Science this is very interesting. I mean, you have to really give it up completely. And they're not willing to do that. They feel some kind of particles are going to create the world. No particles are going to create the world, because there is something which is beyond particles. In fact, I tell you what, this is the place, I think I've spent enough time on the 19. This is where verse 20 becomes very relevant. So let's go into that. 20 says, Anoho aniyan ahameva tadvat mahan aham vishvam aham vichitram puratanaha aham purushaha aham ishaha hiranmayaha aham shivarupamasmi. Beautiful verse. So just look at the words first, okay? Anoho aniyan. Anoho means from the smallest. From the smallest. I would even translate that as smaller rather than subtle. They have the same meaning, but we can say smaller. Anuhu means, in fact, the literal meaning of the word anuhu is a small particle. Paramanu. Paramanu, there is a lot of spiritual disciplines that these Vaisheshikas and Naiyayikas and even Sankhyas, they all believe that the world consists very much like what science does. Very similar, and this has been, we have had this knowledge for 10,000 years minimum, much more than that. That there are particles, no doubt about it. There are small particles, because we know that there is atoms, there is molecules, and then there is within the atoms there are there's positive and negative, neutrons, protons, etc. All of that is there. These are particles. And now the science is beginning to break down it even more. So now there are strings and particles and all those kinds of things. So there is an attempt to find out anything finer than this, anything smaller than this. So this is what is called anu. So it says anoho aniyan. So this means I am. So usually it's ahamasmi. See, this is what one has to see. Ahamasmi. I am. I am what? Smaller than the smallest. Anoho aniyam. Ahameva tadvat mahanaham. And he says, okay, so you say you are smaller than the smallest. So maybe you are made out of some very small particles that are yet to be discovered by science. Maybe at one point in time. In fact, that's exactly what science says. All of the scientific, we spend billions of dollars in doing particle research. Billions of dollars. There is laboratories who are building magnets that are so powerful that they make these things run into each other, and then all these sparks fly, and then they are capturing it with photographs, all that. And we live very close to this linear accelerator near Stanford University. I'm like 3 or 4 miles from it. I cross over that every time I go on the freeway. And when Swami Tattvavidananda ji was here, several years back, the first visits, he really wanted to visit the linear accelerator because he was aware of all these particle generators and so on. So he was staying with me, and I said, Swamiji, I'm very close to it, so you want to go see? He says, yes, let's do it. So I took him to, I had already seen it before, but I took him to the linear accelerator, and he was just fascinated. Of course, he's a scientist. I'm just an engineer, but he was a scientist, and biochemistry and so on. So he had a finer, and he's a very fine mind anyway, much finer than my mind. And so he was all agog about all the technology of colliding and how this accelerates this, and then particles collide, and then they come out with something which is even more fine. All that is going on, billions of dollars. Same thing in, I think it's in Switzerland, there is a huge one. So the science is thinking, I think we're going to discover the essence of what life is made out of. I wish somebody would study Vedanta. Someone. It's just amazing. And Vedanta says, this is a foolish hunt. Foolish hunt. Why? We will study this briefly. He says, I am smaller than the smallest. Oh, you're smaller than the smallest? What do you consist of? Can you tell me what kind of particles you're saying it? The next one completely changes it. He says, I'm smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. The science would say, forget it. I am not following you. How you're so inconsistent. What do you mean by smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest? Doesn't make any sense. This is why they say this all religion stuff is just ridiculous. Non-scientific. No. You are non-scientific because you refuse to look at the reality of how things really are. This is the situation. I'm smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. Mahan means huge. What's the word that he uses here? Yeah. So here he says subtler than the subtle and greater than the great. So you can say, I think if I were to translate, I would say I am smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. How is that possible? And then he says, let's finish the words and then we will go into this. Anoho aniyan ahameva tadvat mahan aham vishvam aham vichitram. Vichitram means amazing. Vichitram means with manifold is a good word. Yes, I am amazing, incredible. So many different ways I am. And then let's finish the words here. Puratanaha, ancient. Aham eva purushaha, I am the whole. Ishaha, the ruler. Hiranmayaha aham, I am effulgent. Shiv Rupam aham, I am the nature of happiness and auspiciousness. So these are the words. Okay? Now let's look at the meaning of some of these words. So let's look at the first one, which is smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. What does that mean? What it means is, I am sizeless. If you are measuring me in terms of size, you're making a mistake. You have to elevate your measurement in terms of whether I am sizeful or sizeless. And I am sizeless. What does it mean, sizeless? I am the one in which both smallness and bigness appear. This is what I have to understand. This is what Vedanta says you should look for this. My dear foolish person, grow up, be wise, see the fact about it. This is what it says. Anoho aniyan mahan mahato mahiyan. As Kathopanishad says. And what it means is, don't you see, try to see this, that you are the content in which smallness and bigness exist. What? Content in which smallness and bigness exist? Yes. Oh, can you show me an example? Thank you. Thank you for asking. The ocean. The ocean. Ocean? How? In the ocean, there are small waves and big waves. So if somebody says, can you tell me what the reality of the ocean is? I will say, I am smaller than the smallest wave, water. And I am bigger than the biggest wave, same water. So I am not at the level of smallness and bigness, but the very underlying basis for both of them. Underlying basis? So what does the underlying basis look like? At least in the water I can say it's H2O. Two molecules of hydrogen with one molecule of O and become, that's a That's one of the wonders of life, how water is, H2O. But what is this me, who is the very basis of smallness and bigness? What do I consist of then? If I am someone real, what do I consist of? So this is the meaning of transcendence. Immanence and transcendence. So he says, Puratanaha. So Puratanaha means, you know what Puratana really means? Puratana here means the ancient one. Ancient here means before any manifestation. That means never really born, isn't it? Because in terms of what is something being born, what it was born out of is more ancient. So the Puratanaha means I am Anadihi, I am beginningless. Means I am always there. Because you cannot say when were you, okay, you're always there means when were you born? Hey, that question doesn't make any sense. I'm telling you I'm always there. In fact, time was born from me. So you cannot measure me. I'm there before time. You cannot measure me in terms of time. I am the father and mother of time. Puratanaha means anadihi, always there, where there is no birth. This is the nature of consciousness. This is the nature of you and I. My problem is that I don't easily accept it because I'm looking for something formful. My idea of things that are there they must be born sometime or the other. So I don't even go in that direction. My mind just blocks me for a while. But then I am told that if you just stay with it, think about it. Puratanaha means anadi, timeless. Then Purushaha. Next word. Purushaha means, so to understand Purushaha, one important thing to see, there I was studying some time ago, I'm actually studying I take some text on a regular basis. And I just follow through with it, and just because text has, just like in the Kaivalya Upanishad, as we will do by the way, so after today there's only 2 more classes left and we will complete it. In fact, I will complete Kaivalya in the next class. And the following class, which is the last one, will be a complete revision of from start to finish. Well, not every word, every verse, but we'll get an overall view of it. And I think you know that I'm very high on revisions. So I think that will be very useful to you. And with that, the Kaivalya would be complete. So I I was studying Bhagavad Gita with Swami Shankarananda's commentary on it, which is just a marvelous one I've discovered. And I might take it up. We'll see once the survey is over. I might take that up. There's a good likelihood that I'm going to take Bhagavad Gita with Shankarananda. I'll discuss that with Swami Viditatmananda. So that's a separate thing altogether. But I was reading this book, and it really pointed out a very interesting definition. By the word subtle, anoho aniyan. Anuhu means, or you can say subtle. There's some Sanskrit word for subtle also, which I'm not recalling it at the moment. But what Swami Shankarananda said was that the word subtle means pervasive. So the subtlety, degree of subtlety equals the degree of pervasiveness. What a beautiful definition. Beautiful definition. Airtight. You cannot dismiss it. Because if subtle means something which is specific. Subtle means something specific and hard to be visible. If it is easily visible, then it's not subtle. That means that it has a very definite definition. This is where it is. And so on. So in that sense, you can say that the table is not subtle, but what it is made out of is subtle. Wood. Anyway, so that's a separate definition. So similarly, for example, if you look at a clay pot, then the clay, like a cup, is not that subtle because it is very visible. But the clay itself is more subtle. It is more pervasive. It can be in this cup, it can be in another cup, it can be in any of the cups. Similarly on golden ornaments, the gold is more subtle. And the gold subtlety means it's more pervasive. Similarly here also you can go back to our definition of a room space. Room space is very specific at a particular point. Compared to that, the total space is more subtle. Why? Because it is more pervasive. So now, having gone through that analysis, we can go back to I am subtler than the subtle. I am. This is where we have to tell the scientists. You guys calling, I'm sorry to use this word, you stupid guys. Stop looking for subtle things because you are the subtlest thing, which is the very basis of all the subtle things. Are you ready to understand that? He says, no, I'm not ready to understand. This is all religious stuff, spirituality and so on. I'm a scientist. Okay, you're a scientist. What does that mean? I want to duplicate it and test it and prove it, and then I'm going to write a big article and maybe I'll get a PhD on this. Okay, fine. Okay, you do that. But can I tell you something? It is stupidity Can I tell you something more? It is once you understand this, you understand everything. No, 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 I don't want to do all of that. This is what situation is. Subtler than the subtlest means you are the basis of subtlety. And it's pervasive because, just look at this, this is an important thing to see. Your consciousness is the most pervasive thing that there is. You, not you as a person, but the very reality of you, which is Satyam Jnanam Anantam, which is Brahman, is the most subtle there is, the more pervasive thing there is. Sanatanaha, Puratanaha, Purushaha. Yeah, that's the word that's what triggered me the whole thing. Purushaha means one which is pervasive, which fills up everything. So the word Purusha also means one which is the substance behind everything. Like, for example, the substance behind all the room spaces is space. It fills up all definitions of individuality. That's called Purushaha. And when did it begin? It never began. It's always been there. We always are looking for, we are always looking for some beginning. Don't look for a beginning. Think about beginningless. Oh, but there is no such thing as beginningless. Yes, there is. You are the beginningless. Well, I have to think about it. Fine, think about it. So, Purushaha Aham. Then the next word is Ishaha. Ishaha. So, Ishaha means the ruler. The ruler. The ruler means what? Is it the president or a dictator or king? Maybe? It's all of the above. Go higher. Go higher. It's higher than the highest king. You know, there's that, I think I've told you the story that what reminded me of is, so this is a story about the King Akbar, who's a Mughal king. So this is what is happening in India, that we've been brainwashed. Even the historians have been brainwashed by only talking about the Mughal kings that were only like 500-600 years old. Akbar and the Taj Mahal, Humayun, and so on. And we were all taught to really study them. And this is an interesting study how one got killed and then they killed his father and then they became the king. All of that is being completely changed. That is just a very small part of the history of India, and that's not the whole thing. We should go back thousands of years and go back to the Hindu civilization. All that is happening thanks to Modi ji. But anyway, that's a separate matter altogether. So we look at Akbar. So there is a story. So Akbar was one of the more benevolent. Some of them were like Aurangzeb and so on. He just decimated all of the temples and made thousands of temples. Wherever he would see a Hindu temple, he would just say, decimate it. build a mosque on it. So Akbar was not one of those. He was a more liberal, but he was still, he didn't believe in complete equality. Anyway, that's a separate thing. So there is a story that the Akbar used to have a morning session in his palace where public was invited and was asked they can make a special petition for getting something, that my daughter needs my daughter wants to be married and I want some extra money from you, and like that. So the story goes that there was a man who um, his wife kept bothering him. Why don't you go and ask Akbar for something? We are such poor people, and he can give you anything. Just go and ask for him. So he was not very happy without it, but his wife kept badgering him and needling him. So finally he just went there. So that day he sat down, and Akbar was very late. He was not coming in. So he was kept waiting and looking at his watch. Finally he said, this is amazing. What's happening? So he asked one of the guards there. He says, where is the king? Because I have to go do my business, and I can't wait forever, but I do want to talk to him. Where is he? So the guard told him, he says, he's doing his special prayers today to God, because on this day he spends a lot of time praying. So he said, praying for what? He says, he prays to God for you. Why do you pray for God? You pray for happiness, for things and so on. That's what he's doing. So the person said, what? This is very interesting. I am praying to Akbar, and Akbar is praying to God. What's wrong with me? Why don't I directly pray to God? So he started thinking, and he started to get up. And this is a historical thing where he was ready to get up. And just then Akbar came in and he saw him leaving. He says, this man, where is he going back? Is he not staying? So the guard said, sir, he says he has found a greater Akbar, and he is just going directly to him. That's what he told me. I'm going directly to God. So when you say a ruler, this is not just an ordinary king. This is the king of the kings. In fact, we also says Devasya Ishaha. Even, and this is what it says, in fact I think it says that here also, that all the very wise people also look for him. This is exactly what happens, because we are influenced by people that they're supposedly greater than us. If everybody is going in that direction, that's the direction I want to go to. And so the Isha is the king of the kings. So here Swami Viditatmananda, this is one of his favorite topics. He does this very well. Swami Viditatmananda says, my goodness, the ruler, Isha, must have a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous worry. You must, because if we have to take care of a couple of our children, and we have to take care of where the next meals are going to come from, there is a certain concern and worry and responsibility. Imagine what the responsibility of Ishvara will be. So many people I have to feed, and how he must be so worried. That is just amazing. Yes, Swami Viditananda is very good. He says one of his favorite topics actually. And he says no. He does it without any effort. But the whole world has to be run. How can he do it without any effort? This is what needs to be understood. So this is what is meant by immanence and transcendence. Even though he is present everywhere, but he transcends it. So similarly here also, if the water is the very basis of the smallest wave and the biggest wave, they have to just, I am the recipient of both of them. Doesn't make any difference to me. You have to exist in me. So there was somebody, one of the texts pointed this out. He says, suppose there is a farmer who prays to God and says, God, please, I'm planting my new crop and I want to make sure that very soon there will be rains, otherwise I will just be in bad shape. Tomorrow I'm going to sow and I hope that there is rain tomorrow. So this is the prayer to God by this farmer. His next door neighbor, the farmer's next door neighbor, is getting his daughter married in his house. And he is invited, you know how the Indian marriages are. You don't invite 20, 30 people, you invite 400, 500, the whole village. He invites the whole village outside. There's no inside the house. There's no house can accommodate that. He invited 400 people. He's praying to God. Oh God, please don't make it rain. Next door, the farmer is saying, please God, please make it rain. This guy on the left-hand side says, God, please don't make it rain. So if you are God, you're scratching your head and saying, what do we do? How do I do that? One or the other person will be very unhappy. How can I satisfy both of them? So, God really does not care. He allows the individual karma of the people to dictate what the results will be. As Swami Chinmayananji used to say, Lord Vishnu has completely computerized the whole creation and gone to sleep. This is the ultimate cloud business. Let all the data centers run, everything is taken care of, power is there, no problems. Cloud business is a very big business in the computer science. Everybody is trying to be the ultimate recipient of data and so on. So Vishnu is doing that without any efforts. So if you are Amazon or Microsoft or Google, you have to hire the right people to do clouds and so on. Ishvara runs the whole structure of the world without even trying. How? By his mere presence. Mere presence? How does a mere presence do this? So some examples are given, but then we have to really understand the full implication of this. So some examples, and probably the most interesting example on this is a powerful magnet without moving can make a lot of action happen by itself, by its very nature. So exactly the same way in the space, the magnetic nature of the space makes the whole world go around. So you have the sun moving and the earth moving and then the moon moving, all basically based on the magnetic forces that are already there. As the very nature of space, the very nature of Ishvara. Space is nothing but the first manifestation, the subtlest manifestation. See, the subtlest vastu. I'm avoiding the word thing because it is not a thing. Why is it not a thing? That will be explained, and that's the last word that I will explain. Hiranmayaha. So it is not a thing, but it is the subtlest entity which is non-manifest is Brahman. That is you. That is you. Ahamasmi. The whole thing is Ahamasmi. You are always there. Sanatanaha. Ishaha. And you are Ishaha. Why? Because by your very presence things are happening. Like it happens in dream. So therefore you are all pervasive and non-manifest. And no manifestation can happen without you. That's how you are the presence that creates the rulership. I remember Swami Viditatmananda also gives this example. Swami Maheshananda ji also, and I remember from my own experience. So Swami Maheshananda ji also says that, listen, if you have a certain culture in a business, you don't have to keep drumming the culture every minute. You make it so pervasive that people behave according to the culture. This is what happened to me when I joined Hewlett-Packard. Because I tell you, it was an interesting experience because I used to work for IBM. And IBM's culture was slightly different. The culture of the company was that be disciplined in what you do and follow the directions of your bosses. Don't do anything that will get you into trouble. And if you need advice, then go to your manager and ask for their advice and so on. This was the culture of IBM. When I joined HP, I had already read a little bit about Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard, and also was attracted by their personality, and also the fact that their headquarters were here, whereas in IBM's case, the headquarters is in Armonk in New York. So I decided to, for lots of other reasons, I'm just oversimplifying it, I joined HP. And when I joined HP, I found that there is a certain culture within the company which was very attractive to me. The most important one was ethicalness. Be ethical in whatever you do. Don't cut corners, don't lie, no cheating, no nothing. Business in general is non-ethical. From advertising and from selling and so on is non-ethical. Because they exaggerate, they lie, and somehow or the other make money. This is basically non-ethical. Hewlett Packard was an exception. Very honest and very ethical. That attracted me. And what I found was that nobody went around telling you be ethical, be ethical. The culture was in the company itself. And I behaved according to that culture. Nobody had to tell me. So here also Swami Viditatmananda says that Ishvara rules by the very nature, the very presence. So here Hewlett and Packard ruled because of the very presence of that culture. And so here the culture is forgiveness by seva, by daya, by honesty and all that. That is the very culture of Ishvara. That's how he runs. There's no effort required. Okay. Then the last word is Hiranmayaha. So the Hiranmayaha means, this is what I was saying, that I will not define a non-manifest thing as a thing. Why? Because our nature is light and effulgence and wisdom, intelligence, knowledge, jnana swarupa, our own intrinsic nature. That same Purushaha that we talked about, the same Ishaha that we talked about, that the same subtler than the subtlest we talk about is the nature of knowledge. And we see this every day. Why? Because overlying and also all pervasiveness is I know. Don't you see that I am, the very nature of myself is I know. Knowledge. That is the self-effulgence. So the effulgence is not imported, it is not dependent, it is the very nature of the Atma. Is meant by the word Hiranmaya. Hiranmaya means gold, golden. So the nature of gold is that by itself it shines. Anyway, so that is this whole sentence. Anoho aniyan ahameva tadvat mahanaham Vishwam aham vichitram. We probably didn't spend enough time on Vishwam aham vichitram, but the whole world, all experiences follow this rule. Puratanaha aham, Purushoham, Ishaha, Hiranmaya aham, Shivarupamasmi. And so the very nature of the human being, as we were discussing in the morning class also, is nothing but Shivaha, Sukham, Anandaha. And we are just covering it up by my doubts and ignorance. So my nature is that I am fully effulgent in the sunlight. If I just open the windows of my mind, I find that my nature is effulgence, which is sunlight. So with that, I close the class, and I think in the next week from today, we will do verse number 22. Is it 21 and 22? Yeah, we can do. We may have to. So we have two classes in which we will finish the text and also do a quick revision. So with that, I close the class. Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Excuse me a second. Let me go to the YouTube. Well, that's good. We're just about completing with the Kaivalya Upanishad. So you would have a complete Upanishad introduction. And it's always a good thing to take up a single Upanishad and just do it from start to finish. And so hopefully we would be doing it from next week on, and look forward to the next couple of classes, and then after that we will see what we do after that, as I've indicated to you on my survey. So with that, good to see you all, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Hari Om.